Κύριε Γιάλομ, διαβάζοντας το τελευταίο σας βιβλίο, ήταν μεγάλη έκπληξη για μας να βρεθούμε μπροστά σε ένα ολόκληρο κεφάλαιο που ήταν αφιερωμένο στην Ελλάδα. Αναφέρεται χαρακτηριστικά ότι από όλες τις χώρες που μεταφράζουν τα βιβλία σας, η Ελλάδα, αν και μικρή σε πληθυσμό, είναι ιδιαίτερα συνδεδεμένη με το έργο σας. Γιατί πιστεύετε ότι συμβαίνει αυτό?
Yeah, well, I think given the small number of people in Greece, the sales are probably per person much higher than any other country. And the reason that's so is I can't possibly guess. But certainly when I go to Greece, the audiences have been extremely large and enthusiastic, and even the taxi cab drivers read my books. So I don't know the answer to that. Although it is interesting when you look at the countries that most use my books, many of them are Turkey, for example, is a huge market right now for me, so the books are selling very heavily in Turkey, and I get letters from Turkish readers and also a lot of readers in Iran. So maybe there's something in the Near East that somehow the mentality seems to be similar.
Το τελευταίο σας βιβλίο είναι αυτοβιογραφία. Γιατί αποφασίσατε να το γράψετε τώρα και τι σας κάνει να δηλώνετε ότι μετά από αυτό δεν θα υπάρξουν άλλα?
As one gets into their 80s, one forgets a lot of things. So I wanted to be sure I could write a memoir while my mind was still intact. But I had always felt that I had a lot of books in my mind, stacked up in my mind that I would write, and always this was the last one. And now I'm growing old, and I thought that it's time to write this book. People don't write novels and books and stories very often in their 80s. You won't find many writers, good writers, who are as old as I am.
Οι άνθρωποι που έχουν καταφέρει πράγματα στη ζωή τους φοβούνται λιγότερο το θάνατο?
Well, it's not so much our accomplishments, but it's the fact that we don't have a lot of regrets in our life, that we feel that we've been able to do what we hope to do, and we've not been reluctant to go ahead and try various things, to try for an education, to try for a family. But people who may have lived a whole life where they have just filled with regrets for all the things they haven't done or all the things they haven't tried, I do think that these are people who may fear death a great deal more.
Υπάρχουν πράγματα για τα οποία έχετε μετανιώσει?
I have very few regrets. I feel like I've done very much what I wanted to do in life. And presently, I don't have many regrets. I've got a good relationship with my family and my wife, and I feel like I've fulfilled myself at work, written what I could write. So no, I'm not filled with regrets about my life. But it's an important question to ask patients in therapy. How can they live a regret-free life? How can you even come back to see me in a couple of weeks, and what new regrets would you have built up? And how do you begin to live in a regret-free manner? I use that question very often in my treatment.
Στο τελευταίο σας βιβλίο βρίσκεται σοφία σε μία γραμμή του Dickens. Λέτε σχετικά ότι όσο πλησιάζω πιο κοντά στο τέλος, ταξιδεύω στον κύκλο ολοένα και πιο κοντά στην αρχή του. Αυτό είναι η ζωή τελικά, ένας κύκλος?
I think it is true. I like Dickens' statements that I see a lot of people as they get very older thinking much more about the earlier part of their lives, and I think that's been true with me too. So Dickens is one of my favorite writers, and I think at times he had great wisdom.
Και ποιο θα λέγατε εσείς, ένας υπαρξιακός ψυχοθεραπευτής, ότι είναι το νόημα μέσα σε αυτόν τον κύκλο?
There isn't any meaning of life. I mean, we have to make a meaning for ourselves. We're creatures who are thrust into the world, and we have to do things that we find meaningful. And we often do it through families, through children, through writing, through helping others, through compassion. Unfortunately, a lot of people may do it through other aggressive means, which isn't very good for the world.
Ναι, Ο Νίτσε αναγνωρίζει ότι είναι συχνά άρρωστος, αλλά επιμένει ότι το σώμα του είναι άρρωστο, όχι ο ίδιος, όχι η ουσία του. Όσο για τις μαύρες περιόδους, λέει πως είναι περήφανος που έχει το κουράγιο να τη ζει. Είναι περήφανος που έχει το κουράγιο να ζει μαύρες περιόδους, το φαντάζεσαι. Τρέλες. Για την προδοσία, ναι, υποπτεύομαι ότι αναφέρεται σε αυτό που έγινε με τη Φροϊλάν Σαλομέ. Εκείνος όμως ισχυρίζεται ότι το έχει ξεπεράσει και δεν θέλει να το συζητήσει. Όσο για την αυτοκτονία, αρνείται ότι είναι αυτοκτονικός. Αλλά υπεραμείνεται του δικαιώματος του ασθενούς να επιλέγει ο ίδιος το θάνατό του. Παρόλο που μπορεί να καλωσορίζει το θάνατο, λέει ότι η τελική ανταμοιβή των νεκρών είναι ότι δεν ξαναπεθαίνουν, έχει πάρα πολλά να κάνει ακόμα, πάρα πολλά βιβλία να γράψει. Μάλιστα λέει ότι το κεφάλι του εγκυμονεί βιβλία και πιστεύει ότι η κεφαλαλγία του είναι οδύνες εγκεφαλικού τοκετού. Ο Φρόιντ κούνησε το κεφάλι του συμμεριζόμενο στην απελπισία του Μπρόιερ. Οδύνες εγκεφαλικού τοκετού. Τρομερή μεταφορά, σαν την Αθηνά που γεννήθηκε από το φρύδι του Δία. Παράξενες σκέψεις, οδύνες εγκεφαλικού τοκετού. Να επιλέγεις το θάνατό σου. Το κουράγιο να ζεις μαύρες περιόδους. Έχει πνεύμα, Γιώζεφ. Αναρωτιέμαι, πρόκειται για ένα τρελό πνεύμα ή για μια σοφή τρέλα?
I went recently, like right before it started, to New York.
Yeah.
It was like my first time there, or not my first time, but first time in a long time.
When was that?
So it was about like 2.5 months ago.
Okay.
And I was really excited for this big trip, and I got to visit my friend who's starting grad school at NYU. And for some reason, we were walking down the street, and out of nowhere, I got like this feeling of anxiety in my stomach. And I was like, oh, this is really weird. Like, I haven't felt anxiety in years. Like, wonder what it's coming from. I hope it doesn't come. Like, all the typical thoughts that come with anxiety.
Yeah.
So that was pretty...
So out of nowhere, you just suddenly were
Yeah, and then I tried to
anxiety.
dive into it later. When for some reason, it made me feel very anxious and insignificant. And just like, wow, there's so many... Like, why does it matter if I sit on this bench or if I don't sit on this bench? Or why does it matter if I wear these shoes or other shoes, or if I say this thing or not this thing? So that's kind of where it started growing. And then it started growing more into like more existential thoughts of like, who am I even? Or like, why are we even here? Or like, what's the point of anything?
At this point, as a therapist, I feel a bit bewildered. One thing I know for certain is that this sudden attack of existential angst does not come out of nowhere. It's inconceivable that life could have been going entirely well for her, and then suddenly this out of the blue attack. So we've got to begin to track it down. One outstanding characteristic of the attack is her sense of insignificance, which is triggered by being in a large city. However, she grew up in a large city in Los Angeles, and we're going to need to start investigating the meaning of this riddle. And furthermore, as I start to try to take some history from you in our first sessions, there was this puzzle that you had been extremely happy in your life. You had had a very good life, and nothing bad had ever happened to you. So that was the way I got. But the way
That's how I would agree with all of that stuff.
you'd agree. But then, as I experienced it, as we went along, things started to change in that way. You know, you related to me that you'd never even had to fall off your bicycle. That you had good relationships with everyone. Your childhood had been perfect, and maybe that's why this was scaring you so much, because everything had been so perfect. But then, over these last few sessions, other things started to come up as we talked. I began to get the feeling that you really weren't that happy as a child. There were a lot of unhappy things going on, especially last week when we talked about this brace that you had to wear for 3 years, and how awful that was, and humiliating it was for you in gym class and things like that. And then we haven't explored this in a greater depth, but also that things were not always very happy at home. Your mother was a pretty unhappy woman, and she was pretty restrictive. And
I think she was happy. She was just worried. I don't know if
she's always
unhappy
worrying
is the
that
word.
if she hears a rustling outside in the yard and thinks that somebody's going to be dead, you know, this sounds like that she is not.
But she isn't really. It's weird to me because like she really does worry a lot, but I would never in my life think of her as unhappy because she's so happy, but she's worried.